All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Tanya Phillips, and I'm the director of the UK Office of Technology Commercialization. And for those of you who are not familiar with our office, OTC is the office on campus that manages and commercializes the university's intellectual property. And our mission in this office is to advance innovation that makes a difference. It is my pleasure to welcome you to one of our signature programs, the UK Women Innovators Network Conference. We are delighted that you took the time out of your day to join us, and you guys are in for a treat today. We have an incredible lineup of successful women innovators that will share their insights, experiences, and key learnings along their entrepreneurial path. So UKWN has a mission to increase the number of women who participate in innovation. And this includes encouraging women to commercialize their university-developed intellectual property and take on leadership roles in scalable venture-backed startups. UKWN provides a forum for women innovators that is supportive and allows them to exchange experiences, advice, and strategies for taking their innovations to the next level. Now, when we began this program a few years ago, our focus was solely on UK innovators. However, as the work of OTC has expanded beyond the boundaries of the campus, so has the vision for UKWN. So we are currently partnering with the Women Innovators, Founders, and Leaders, also known as WIFL. So shout out to all the WIFLites out there. This is a group that was founded by Laura Halligan, the executive director of the Launchable Accelerator, and Meredith Moore, director of operations and community partnerships at Base here. WIFL is a group that meets monthly to network and support a thriving community of female entrepreneurs. We're also in talks with others who share our mission and who want to build a supportive community for female innovators and founders, and actually helping to broaden the opportunities for them. So stay tuned, and we'll have more on that later. So the reason why we do the work that we do is because more women innovators are needed, and so basically to make the world a better place. And so I came across a Forbes article that kind of confirms what we all really know, is that one, diversity generates more revenue. So they found that Fortune 500 companies with at least 3 women in the leading position saw a 60% increase in ROI. 2, women think differently. And so having a diverse team of people forces the team to better prepare and to anticipate alternative viewpoints, which leads to better problem solving. And then 3, we need more female innovator role models. So by celebrating women innovators like we're doing today, it will encourage more women to pursue tech careers. And, you know, when you showcase these women founders, it's easier for someone who's sitting on the sidelines to see this as a career path for themselves. So these things make UKWN and other female-focused programs extremely important to our entrepreneurial ecosystem. So when we provide these supportive environments that assist female entrepreneurs in overcoming obstacles and barriers, we are actually helping to nurture innovations that benefit our society. So one of our goals today is to expose the ways in which our speakers have participated in commercialization and entrepreneurship, and to show that their aspirations are actually attainable by anyone who's interested, any female who wants to pursue that path. We also hope that we can kind of nudge you to participate in some way in an entrepreneurial activity. Another goal of ours is to promote networking among women who have an interest in innovation and entrepreneurship. So we've set aside some time later to do some speed networking, followed by some giveaways. So hopefully you guys will get to meet a lot of other people who are on this call and make some really great connections. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Linda Dwoskin, who is she's going to give our welcome address. So Dr. Dwoskin is a professor of pharmaceutical sciences in the UK College of Pharmacy. She is also a senior associate vice president for research at UK. Dr. Dwoskin's research is focused on drug discovery in the field of neuropharmacology, specifically the development of novel treatments for psychostimulant drug abuse, which includes nicotine, amphetamine, methamphetamine, and cocaine. She has authored over 270 peer-reviewed publications, served on numerous NIH study section panels, and has been funded continuously by the NIH for the past 33 years. That's a wow. Currently, she is the director of an NIH-funded REACH grant entitled Kentucky Network for Innovation and Commercialization. Otherwise known as Kinetic, this grant is focused on nurturing innovators and innovations across the Commonwealth of Kentucky by providing mentoring, education, and a network of relevant expertise to translate academic discoveries to commercialization. And as if all of this weren't enough, Dr. Dwoskin is an inventor on 24 UK patents, and she was a co-founder and vice president of Yopon Therapeutics, which later became Septeris. Her biotech startup raised $60 million in investment and was acquired by Actelion in 2013 following the FDA approval of their drug Valclor. And this is a topical treatment for cutaneous T-cell lymphoma that is still on the market in the United States and around the world. So it is my pleasure to welcome the amazing Dr. Linda Dwoskin.
Well, thank you, Tanya, for the nice introduction, and welcome everybody to the Women's Innovators Network Conference. It's wonderful that you all put this on for us and help us to figure out how to do this sort of work. And when Tanya talks about what all I've done, it amazes me that I've accomplished all of that and I'm still working at it. And, you know, my message is to you is that, you know, I didn't start out to do all of that. It kind of just grew into what it is now. And, you know, I wanted to give you just some highlights of what I think was important as I went down the path that I've been on. And I started at UK in 1988 as an assistant professor, pretty green, but I was very passionate about substance use disorders, then we used to call it the field of drug abuse. And, you know, I saw a need and there was a niche that I wanted to fill in terms of developing treatments. And working in a college of pharmacy, I was lucky to have such a wonderful environment that was very practical in terms of taking research into translation and trying to bring it to people and, you know, and help the clinical situation. So the first thing I did really was to establish my expertise through, you know, publishing and getting grants and becoming known in my field. And through that, being promoted to associate professor and then full professor in 1999. And then what happened then was that I was lucky to partner, and maybe it wasn't so much luck because we were already putting out patents on new compounds. And I was approached by someone who I partnered with, who was an experienced entrepreneur because he was interested in our patents. And I was just lucky to make the right connections with his complementary expertise with mine and the other, the chemist, where we, you know, were the founders of this company, Yopon Therapeutics. And so we founded the company in 2002. So I'd been a full professor for a couple of years and I had a couple of little kids. So trying to balance home life with a very intense academic career, in addition to doing a business on the side, so to speak. And it was all very exciting and a lot of work. And I didn't really know where it was going to lead to. But I think besides establishing expertise as being important and partnering with really good collaborators and people with complementary expertise, the next thing was being willing to take risks and being willing to succeed at what I was doing. So it's almost like a decision that you have to make that you're going to take risk and that you're going to be successful. You know, you have to kind of get all in on that. And so we kept trying to do what we were doing and make a difference. And we were really lucky. We started off with UK kind of as a partner and licensed 5 patents that were focused on substance use disorders. And as it turned out, as Tanya said, we ended up with a drug that was a cancer drug. So not what we set out to do, just going down a path. That's the horse that made it the farthest, fastest, so that we ended up getting that compound onto the market. And so the substance use disorder treatments that I was working on didn't get to where I wanted them to go. So the next message is that it never really seems to end. So I'm still trying to do that, is develop a treatment for methamphetamine use disorder. And I'm currently considering founding another company. And, that would be really amazing to do that and get this compound that we see as our lead compound to the market to help people, because there aren't any therapeutics for these people who are suffering. So when I was doing all of this with Yopine, none of this was in place that Tanya is talking about, like Launch Blue and UXL and different things that the university puts together to help you do the things that I did, just kind of stumbling along and being successful just from working so hard, basically. So now there's help, and I hope that you will take advantage of this help through doing things with Launch Blue and maybe with Kinetic. There's proof of concept funding and training and how to commercialize the discoveries that you're making. And you just really have to connect with OTC to take advantage of all this. And they are just dying to help you to do that. And absolutely, we need more women who are successful and who can, mentor others to come into this sort of an experience. And I'm happy to participate in the meetings that we'll have after the speakers, if anybody would like to ask me any questions about my experiences. So thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to give the opening address and looking forward to hearing the other speakers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dwowski, and you are an inspiration to us all. And I look forward to hearing about your new startup company. That's really exciting. So we are now going to turn our attention to the main event with the 3 incredible women that we have. They're going to talk about how they persevered through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. I'm positive that you will draw some inspiration from their stories and feel the urge to take action in some way on your own ideas. So each speaker is going to introduce themselves and their companies. We are going to first start with Kelly Wright with Fresh Eyes Solutions, and then Gilson Capilouto with Infant Labs. Kate Van Pelt of Synaptech is stuck in an airport in New York City, but she sent us a video, so we're going to play her video for you, and then we'll all come back, and Dr. Dwowski will come back also, and we can have Q&A at that point. So Kelly, take it away.
All right, let me get my presentation going. And as Tanya said, I am Kelly Wright, the founder and CEO of Fresh Eyes Solutions. And what we're developing is a fragrance sampling kiosk that you can see here in the picture. And I'll get to that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. But kind of 3 main goals for today is I want you to, from my journey, the things that kind of help me succeed are find the people that let you be weird, think inside the box differently, and just go for it. And so I want to start kind of where I began on my journey, which is as a chemist. And so starting out in chemistry in particular, things are very procedural. You have methods, you follow those methods, you might increment on those, but kind of how do you get from there to the beauty world? And this is where those 3 points start to come in. So the way I went from chemistry to the beauty world is 1, finding the people that let me be weird. So let me clarify just a little bit here. We all have creativity inside of us. We all have that spark, that innovation. But I think in society, a lot of times we learn to kind of hide that so we better fit in with our peers and with people around us. And so we start to conform the way that we act, that we think, that we speak to what other people are doing. And so this is where I say, let you find the people who let you be weird, because when you have those creative ideas and you have that supportive group, you can come forward with those ideas, and you have that network that's going to support you in those unique ideas. And so kind of where this led me is, once I had that network that was supportive, no matter what crazy idea I came up with, is I was at Lexmark and they had entrepreneurial challenges. And so these are kind of like the startup weekends, which are coming up pretty soon here in Lexington, but it was inside of Lexmark. And so I started participating in these entrepreneurial challenges. And what I found is it lets you think inside the box differently, which is that second point. So I was within Lexmark. I couldn't invent a new horseback riding saddle. That's not inside the box of Lexmark. That's not helpful. And so sometimes I find that when you have constraints on your creativity, you can actually become more creative, because you know the limits of your creativity and you just have to come about it in new ways. And so that's where I'm saying, think inside the box differently. And as you're looking particularly at entrepreneurship, which is inside of an organization, look at how you can look with a new perspective at the things that you already know. From there, after my time at Lexmark, I did the Awesome Inc. bootcamp to learn software development. And I've been doing software development for 5 years, and I'm still working with Apex Software on that. And then kind of where I am on my journey. So this is my background, but what we're here to talk about is entrepreneurship. And so for me, the journey into this fragrance kiosk is, one, I'm just kind of a nerd. And so I like coming up with solutions and ways of solving problems. But two is this. This is a typical way that you see fragrances in a store. They're locked behind glass. And so for me, that's kind of the end of it. Having traditionally been more of an introvert, I don't like to go track down a store worker, ask for help, and then have them watch me as I'm trying to learn about fragrances. And so I just won't. The other part is the pushy salespeople, or just salespeople in general. If I'm just exploring, I don't want that pressure to buy. And so for me, these are two personal, bigger things that have kind of stood in the way of learning about fragrances. And so the solution is this fragrance sampling kiosk. And I have this little thing down at the left because we're working on naming it Pomander Tech. And this is a pomander at the bottom left. And what it is a few hundred years ago, they would wear it on a necklace or carry it with them to carry a fragrance, to give their fragrance off to the world. And so this is what we want to do a little bit with our kiosk, is present fragrances to the world. And so here you're seeing two perspectives of our Pomander Tech kiosk. On the left, you're seeing our current prototype. And on the right, you're seeing a little bit of where we plan to go, with not just the exit port, but also that point of sale, being able to pay for it there. And so what this looks like for you as a consumer, you come up, you approach the kiosk, and you take a short quiz. And this will help you find the fragrances that are right for you. When you find those, we present you with 3 options for fragrances. And if you're interested in one of them, you can try it. And what trying it looks like is the kiosk dispenses a card. It has the product information, a QR code so you can find it again later, and the fragrance itself. And then if you like it, you can complete the purchase right there. A little bit about the team. Again, I'm Kelly, the CEO. I have an intern right now. Her name's Naya, and she's really great. She's been doing a lot of the design work for me and doing software development as well, which fits with her current double major in media arts and computer science. And then one thing I do want to point out is that you don't have to have all the strengths to be able to start a company or to innovate. And so what you need is a strong team to support you. And I have that in my advisors. So first I have Jason with logistics and operations, David Hassler with finance and retail, Mark, who's engineering, and then finally David Kern, who's fragrance and retail. And I want to talk a little bit more about him. So this is one of those instances where you just have to go for it. And what I was doing is searching for people in the fragrance industry and how to connect with them. And who I found was David Kern, who owns a fragrance store in Louisville that does American-only fragrances. And the fragrance company is American Perfumer. And so I just reached out to him, did kind of a cold email, and he responded, and it went well enough that he now helps advise. And we've used his fragrances inside the kiosk during our pilot program and demonstration. And so just kind of taking that leap of faith and going for it and reaching out to someone has really worked well for us and helped us move forward. So we've been doing a pilot program. We've been to a few locations to get feedback and to iterate, make it better. You can always make things better and learn. And so that's where we've been working. Some of the other things, the Von Allman Center Bootcamp through UK, that was kind of a good starting point. From there, we moved into the Launch Blue Accelerator and then the incubator. These have really helped us define our business and how to portray it and just really pushed us forward. So if you're looking for that push, I would recommend these programs. Again, working on our pilot program with American Perfumer. We pitched at the Wildly Possible competition and we won that event. And then this past Saturday, I just got back from a conference in France. And so this is another one of those just go for it type of situations. I didn't get to pitch to any of the big companies, but I did get to talk to a few of them. And I now have some connections in Brazil and Spain and France in the beauty and fragrance industries. And so there's no immediate action, but I've really made some good connections there and am looking forward to kind of where that's going to take us. And so again, the things that have helped me succeed, find the people that let me be weird, think inside the box differently, and just go for it. I'm Kelly Wright with Fresh Eye Solutions. My contact information's on the screen. I'd be happy to talk to anybody, and I'll hopefully talk to some of you during Q&A and the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gilson Capilouto, and I am co-founder and chief clinical officer of Infant Labs, which is a digital health medical device company based in Atlanta, Georgia. And I am professor emerita in the College of Health Sciences in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. I'm a speech language pathologist by profession and have had a history of entrepreneurship, but this was my first foray into the medical device world. Well, like anything, what Kelly was talking about too is my journey began in 2010 with an idea. So that's where we all are. We have an idea. And it takes a lot of what Kelly was talking about to make that idea come alive. But my idea came to me when I was in a conference learning about neonatal feeding. So my career, which spans about 40 years, has been focused on pediatric feeding disorders. In the last 20 on neonatal feeding issues. So preterm infants, sick term infants, and healthy term infants with feeding issues. And I was in a conference and the speaker was talking about the fact that when adults are in the ICU and non-orally fed, after about 48 to 72 hours, their tongue muscle begins to atrophy and they have difficulty with swallowing. And so I made a note on a piece of paper and I wrote this. So could alterations in tongue muscle resulting from disuse contribute to the difficulty we see with preterm babies and sick term babies when they transition to try and feed orally? And the speaker had said, we don't know about babies, and preterm babies, depending on how early they're born, can go as long as 2.5 months before they ever feed by mouth. So they can spend a great deal of time not using their tongue muscle for oral intake. So when I got back to the University of Kentucky with that idea, And we've talked about this. I think Dr. Dwoskin alluded to this, and Kelly spoke about it too. Entrepreneurship is a team sport. There are very few of us that can take an idea to commercialization without working with and consulting with other people. My team consisted of people on this campus with expertise that I needed, expertise in muscle disuse atrophy, Dr. DuPont and Dr. Butterfield, muscle biomechanist, Dr. Butterfield, physiologist, Dr. Reed and Dr. Andrada, and a clinical radiologist, Dr. Chawla. And then Tommy Cunningham, who is now was co-founder and is my business partner, was actually a PhD student at the time that we started this. And essentially, I got advice from all of these people, did a lot of reading, and found out that there were no studies that had actually looked at this question outside the animal world. There were a series of studies that had been done with rat pups, where they took a litter and half were dame reared and half were intravenously fed. And after they sacrificed them and looked at the tongue muscle, there were indeed very significant differences between the two groups, indicating that there was a possibility that there was tongue atrophy among that intravenously fed group. And so I felt like there was some support for this idea. And so I asked Tommy, who has a background in biomedical engineering, and Dr. Butterfield, to come up with a way that we might test this hypothesis. And so our proof of concept work began in 2010 and carried through to 2011. And it was the pilot data we collected was made possible by a grant from the Kentucky Science and Engineering Foundation. And you see the bottle that we have there, and you see nothing is touching the baby, and they're actually taking in liquid. So up to this point, any research that was looking at the sucking performance of these babies was totally looking at pacifier sucking, so no liquid intake. And I wanted to be able to do this with liquid. So that was one of my requests when they were coming up with a method. But I want you to notice too, the bank of computers in the background there. So whenever we wanted to collect data on a baby, we had to take a bank of a 4-tiered bank of computers into the neonatal intensive care unit. And it took 4 people to collect data. So that's going to be important as we move through. So at this time, when we got the results of that study, the proof of concept was valid. We got statistically significant differences between tongue muscle characteristics in preterm babies versus full term. So we knew this was an idea that we wanted to continue to pursue with larger scale studies. So of course, at that time, Dr. Dwoskin said, the infrastructure that's in place now was not in place at this time. And so basically what you would do if you had this idea, you go to Aztec, you tell them what the idea was, and they would put you in front of a group of people to pitch that idea to determine whether or not this was something that UK wanted to put into their portfolio. So the good thing was when the clock started, they already did the work to begin the provisional patent process. So this is my first lesson learned. Number one, audience knowledge is key. So for example, when I was vetting this idea, I was speaking to a group of older men, none of whom had ever fed a baby or had any idea what it was like to feed a baby or the problems that a baby had. So looking back, hindsight would have been to have a neonatologist there or a pediatrician there or someone else that could vouch for the significance of this problem. And audience knowledge is also key when you're raising capital. Even if you have a good pitch, there needs to be some way to bring somebody in that has, whether it's a father who had this experience. I can't tell you how many times we talk to potential investors, and they all have a story to tell around some baby that they knew that had a feeding issue. So that's really important. You want to make sure that you do that. Oral feeding is the most complex skill that the newborn engages in, and this is just not common knowledge. So you're trying to explain to people that no, babies might not necessarily just pick up feeding. And the incidence is extremely high. As many as 70% of preterm infants and 40% of full-term healthy infants have difficulty learning to feed by mouth. And so the audience had no appreciation for the scope of the problem either. So after about a year, they released the IP, and we established CCB Research Group in 2012, and that stood for Cunningham, Capilouto, and Butterfield, and it was basically the mailbox at the end of my driveway. And so here comes lesson number 2, because now we're trying to raise money. So the gender gap, access to finances, is real. It is much more difficult for women to find money to support their ideas versus men. So women-led startups only received a small portion of the venture capitalist funding that was out there, 2.3% in 2020. So the idea here is a really cascade effect. There are significantly more male investors. And so there's a greater comfort investing in people that you're comfortable with, have experience with, and socialize with. So male investors are going to tend to invest in male-run companies. However, today there are so many more female-run venture groups that you should look for and take advantage of if you're trying to pitch an idea to either angel investors or if you're at the place for venture capital. We were able to raise money. We did find that eventually I quit going to the pitches because I was the only female in the room, and it was working to our disadvantage. And so actually my partner, Tommy, ended up being the one doing the pitches, but we raised enough money. We raised about close to $1 million, and we were able to hire a CEO who was an engineer. Tommy took over as chief operating officer. I became chief clinical officer. We hired an operations manager who was also an engineer, a customer support specialist that was an engineer, and a sales manager that had history in medical device. And we also had to seek support, software development, and other kinds of support that we contracted out, marketing, PR, those kinds of things. But we established Infant Labs in 2014. We no longer had a mailbox, but our offices were in the old Biltmore in Midtown Atlanta on the campus of the tech portion of the Georgia Tech campus. We knew we were going to have to do a redesign if we were going to continue this line of research, as well as consider this for commercialization as a tool in the actual neonatal intensive care unit. We could no longer use the system we were using because it was just too bulky and required too many people. Remarkably, in 11 months after some testing, we had design freeze in 2014, and this is the ultimate design that we had through all these iterations. And we were able to get a grant for a larger scale study from the CCTS here at UK, as well as the College of Health Sciences Office of Research. Remarkably, from 2014 to 2015, in 1 year, we were FDA cleared. And this is us at a launch party, and you can see I'm the lone female among all the men. And this was our final product, infant feeding solution. And essentially, infant feeding solution is a smart baby bottle. Nothing touches the baby, and it measures tongue movement on the nipple and then streams the waveforms wirelessly to a tablet. And then once the feeding is completed, with this real-time feedback allows for actual data right at cribside, so you can introduce interventions and determine or not whether they've been effective for the baby in terms of sucking performance. But then the data goes up into our HIPAA-protected cloud. We have proprietary algorithms that churn that data and then spit it back down into objective metrics that are understandable by most people. In 2016, I took an entrepreneurial leave of absence from the University of Kentucky, went to Atlanta to work with the company, and we developed a high quality line of bottle nipples that year, and also introduced our patient portal for EMR integration. Our traction is significant. Our products can be found in facilities in the US, over 50 facilities in the US, but also we're in China, Canada, and Australia. We tend to be found in children's hospitals, pediatric outpatient facilities, and academic medical centers, such as the University of Kentucky. We have a significant portfolio of peer-reviewed publications, as well as third-party validated publications around the utility of this technology. And we are getting ready to advance to launching Infant 2.0 direct to consumer at the Consumer Electronics Show in January in 2022. We're going to take advantage of the connected home nursery boom, and some of the comparables are listed there. Feeding is cited as the #1 concern of parents, even above sleep. So our new 2.0 is going to provide information on all aspects of feeding and growth. We have a very robust portfolio of patents, trademarks, and proprietary data sets, which is very important when you are seeking funding. So even though patents are very difficult to defend, investors want to make sure that you do have patents. So we maintain 100% rights on our flagship product, our nipple line, our bolus delivery system, our breastfeeding jurisdiction, and we have 5 US patents and 1 pending. And we also have wordmark and logo registration jurisdiction. There is a lot of optimism, though, for all of you who are beginning this or in the middle of this. Of the 582 million entrepreneurs globally in 2021, almost half of those were women. The US has 12.3 million women-owned businesses, which translates to about 40% of all US businesses. Women own 31% of small businesses, and female entrepreneurial activity in the US is up 16%. We have an increase of 114% more female entrepreneurs than there were 20 years ago. So the future looks very bright for those of you who are venturing down this path. And I would be happy and look forward to the opportunity to talk to any of you in any way that I can be helpful. And I appreciate the opportunity given to me to speak to you all today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I apologize I cannot be with you live today, so I appreciate Jackie for you pulling up this video and presenting with everybody. Had a little travel hiccups traveling to New York through Atlanta, and I'm sure a lot of you know that pain well. But I appreciate you putting up with me today. At the end of the deck, I do have all my contact information, so please reach out if you want to talk about anything I talk about here, or just connect and talk in general. I'd really appreciate it. And so with that, I would love to get into my presentation. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I did not grow up in Kentucky. I actually grew up in New England. So I grew up in Connecticut and then went off to college in Massachusetts, where I worked for about 4 years. I always joke because of my height, if I grew up here in Lexington, I would have been a basketball player. But in New England, I grew up playing ice hockey, played all the way through college. At that point, though, there wasn't a professional women's hockey league. So being a professional women's hockey player was not in the cards for me then. Luckily, I did find my major at the time, psychology, and fell in love with the brain. Really trying to understand how the brain worked, how it didn't work, and really especially how it didn't work when things were wrong and injured. When I worked in Boston after graduating, I worked at a couple hospitals, the VA hospital and intensive neuro ICU unit, and really started working with traumatic brain injury patients and became really interested in kind of how fragile but also resilient the brain can be to these traumatic injuries, and realized at that point that I can merge my interest in traumatic brain injury and ice hockey and sports and study concussions. And so I went off to University of Michigan and got my PhD out there studying concussions. Also out there, any of you who are data nerds, also got a master's in statistics. So any of you that like data science or graphs, let me know. I'll nerd out with you on that. Luckily, I didn't just make graphs. I also met my husband Doug there at University of Michigan. And after he graduated a year ahead of me. He took a job down here at University of Kentucky. And so when I graduated, I followed him down here, and that's how we ended up in Kentucky. And then after that, we started Synaptech. And so here's a picture of Doug, myself, and James, our third co-founder. And so, Synaptech wasn't something I necessarily saw in the cards for me. I never planned on starting a company, but luckily I knew from experience that kind of some of the best things come unexpectedly. A great story I have about this is freshman orientation in college. Everybody's, looking and trying to think about picking their major, and the one who gave the talk that day said, stop thinking about picking your major. This is a liberal arts school. Take as many classes as you want, because the only careers you know right now are doctor, lawyer, whatever your mom does, and whatever your dad does. And at that point, I wanted to be a physician. So I thought this woman was in my head, like she knew what I was thinking. And I really, at that point, I guess, based on her logic, had 3 career choices because, doctor, lawyer, my dad's a lawyer, and then my mom's a nurse. But luckily, I stayed open and took her advice and ended up switching out of pre-med, became a psychology major, and started down the research route. And so applying kind of that experience and that thinking, I definitely, am open to kind of going off this path, but I'm definitely a person that likes to have things planned out and know the route we're going to take to get there. But one thing that kind of took me off the academic track and away from the typical kind of PhD academia professor route was that I really couldn't stop thinking about the problems in concussion care today. And to give you an idea of the problems that kept on coming up in my head and I kept thinking about were how many of concussions go undiagnosed. So 30 to 50% of concussions are undiagnosed for a myriad of reasons, whether that's athletes not reporting their concussions because they want to continue playing, or is it because there's not a clinician there to diagnose the concussion. And this is a huge number when you think about already there's 7 concussions occurring every minute. And so if we're underestimating this number by 30 to 50%, that's a lot of concussions and a huge public health burden for especially this young population growing up. So middle school, high school, college. And because I'm a problem solver, I figured, there's got to be a solution. And my PhD, I think, did a fantastic job equipping me to figure out and find the problems. But I wasn't doing a lot to necessarily solve them. And I saw that as the real opportunity that I could do is take all my knowledge from my PhD with my personal experience as a hockey player and translate that into a solution. And it just so happens that the solution is Synaptech and a startup company. But it didn't always start as Synaptech. It actually started off as Synapser. And it started off here at the University of Kentucky boot camp. So highly recommend you starting off at the boot camp if you can. If you're at UK or even if you're a community member not affiliated with UK, highly recommend starting there. Test out your ideas, see if it's a viable business and learn and grow from there. But I started off the idea there, started off with the idea of Synapser, linking concussion data with EHR data. That idea was completely scrapped. My original idea was to kind of be like the TurboTax W2 uploader, where you take a snapshot on your camera, uploads the data in the forms, and then you're done. Well, no one wanted that, so thank God we didn't build it. And thank God I brought on James and Doug, who helped kind of iterate the idea, refine it. We evolved into Synapser, refined our logo, started refining our product and our solution. And then finally, Doug and James had an intervention with me and said the Synapser name is terrible. We need a new one. And so we landed on Synaptech. And we also, refined our product and our solution at this point through our customer discovery and really talking to our customers. And so now what Synaptech is focused on is focused completely on concussion assessment, making it easier, more effective, and ultimately more accessible. And where we're at today definitely wouldn't happen without the team. So definitely find people that you can build a team with. It's a hard journey to do on your own, but find a team and find people that also can't stop thinking about the problem you have too. Here's a picture of James and I working late in the evening, drawing up some mock-ups. So you definitely want to find co-founders or people who are just as passionate as you are. I think there's a unique opportunity here in Lexington. I think there's a great community, and I think it's a great place to start a startup. You have the Entrepreneurs Bootcamp that I talked about earlier. You also have Awesome Inc., Launch Blue, and a bunch of other groups that I probably am forgetting and not listing here. But I think even just the fellow founders and companies are great resources, and people are willing to sit down and grab a coffee and chat with you. And so I think it's a real great community to learn and grow a company in. And then the last thing is I'll just say is that it's definitely a roller coaster. You will have the best and worst day all in one day, and multiple times over. So definitely find what you're passionate about, because it's a hard roller coaster if you're not solving something you're really deeply passionate about or motivated by every day. And so what can I share with you that I've learned through this process? So like I just was talking about, find something that you can't get off your mind, that you can't stop thinking about, that you really want to solve, whether it's you have a personal vested interest in it, or you just love the idea of trying to solve that problem. Find something that you really can't get off your mind, and it's something that you will regret not doing. I think that's kind of a great motivator. It was a motivator for me to start Synaptech, because again, it wasn't necessarily on my plan or my agenda, but I couldn't let the idea go, and so luckily Doug reminded me that you got to try it, otherwise you'll regret it. This kind of leads me to my next point too, is don't wait for a sign, start now. I think it's kind of also like the adage of there's no good time to have kids. There's also no good time to do a startup, right? There's not going to be this miracle sign. I think this is the biggest thing I regret. I wish I started sooner and doing more earlier, but hindsight's 2020. So it's the biggest thing I could say for you all is, start early, start now. If you have an idea, there's small things you could do starting today, right? To test out this idea, to test out if this is really something you want to do. The other adage is we greatly overestimate what we could do in a day and underestimate what we could do in a year. So start today and you'll be surprised where you're at a year from now. And then the last point, I guess, I couldn't do this presentation without saying it, being someone who studies brain health. Definitely make time for yourself and your health, physical, mental, everything. It's definitely a long, hard journey, so make sure you're taking time for yourself. And it's a balancing act, right? There's no perfect formula, and you're going to be juggling most days, and it's just figuring out when you're juggling which balls today are glass that you can't drop and which ones are plastic that, it's okay if they drop on the floor today. So let yourself kind of have that, self-empathy and let those balls drop where they have to, and make sure you're keeping yourself well and healthy. So with that, I just want to thank you all for listening, putting up with me today as I'm traveling, and hope to hear from you and hope to meet and chat with you very, very soon. Thank you.
Dr. Capilouto and Kelly back on, and please put questions in the chat if you have any, but I want to ask, so if you guys were starting over in this process and you had all the knowledge that you gained throughout, what do you wish you knew at the beginning of it that you learned over that time? And anybody can answer.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with the last speaker. That's a real roller coaster ride. There's ups and downs, and it's kind of a never ending roller coaster, but it's super exciting. And, it's true. There's good and bad days when you think, things aren't working well and you're not going to make it. And then you persevere and keep going. And I didn't know how long of a roller coaster ride it would be, and I'm still on it. So yeah, that was something I didn't know from the beginning. So it's not for people who are faint of heart, that's for sure, because there's a lot of ups and downs that are really up and really down.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
I would agree with that. It is it is a roller coaster. It's very satisfying though when you're successful. Highly recommended. I think for me, and I think Dr. Dwoskin touched on this, you know, maintaining a full-time faculty position and having a business on the side, I think that it's a difficult dance. And, you know, as a faculty member with a startup, you have to jump through a lot of hoops that other people don't have to jump through on an annual basis. So probably understanding that that was coming, I think would have been less frustrating for me as I moved through. But it's a difficult balance, but it's very exciting. Just like Dr. Dwoskin said, it's been a great ride.
I think the thing I've learned is just to go ahead and take some of the risks sooner. And sometimes they're emotional risks. So it's the risk of putting yourself out there and the risk of either success or failure when you do that, because both can be scary. So just going ahead and doing it a little bit sooner.
Well, speaking of faculty and being involved in startups, there is one question about work-life balance versus academic demands and company demands and family. I guess that's more targeted toward Dr. Dwoskin and Dr. Capilouto. Can you guys speak to how you were able to do, what were some tactics or strategies that you used to manage those things and keep them all going?
So my daughters tell me there now that I was never around when they were growing up. They make me feel really guilty at times, and yet they're very independent, forward-thinking women. So somehow I managed to transmit the kind of women I'm proud of in my kids, even though they kind of tackle me every now and shoot arrows at me every now and about how much time I spent working rather than being with them. So I guess that's a regret that I have, but then not really, because they're doing just fine. So, you know, so there's that. I think the balance is difficult, but it is just as an academic anyway. And, you know, I mean, I was one of the first women faculty as bench scientists hired at my college. And it's always been difficult, even just on the academic side, to make sure that I'm paying enough attention to my family and paying enough attention to my job. But, you know, you can do it. It's just being careful with time management and not being too much of a procrastinator, or at least getting over those procrastinations and diving in and being all in, you know? So I think my kids are proud of me. I hope they are.
So I would echo some of that. I think some of the challenge is the same challenge we have in academia, because I mean, you know, every year it seems like there are more and more pressures and demands on faculty. I think for me, I was really fortunate because the team that I was working with took a lot of the responsibility of the engineering and the software and the 3D prototypes. And what they looked to me for was the clinical expertise that made the product valid, and then looked to me to write the papers and do the studies and do the research and actually use it with babies. So it was a really nice balance, because that complemented my academic position at my faculty position. So, but I think one of the things that I would say is giving yourself a break, being patient, and not expecting everything to be perfect. So for one of the, you know, for me, every day I tell myself it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, because it can be fabulous and not perfect. So I think that, the women in this room right now, I would guess, are all AAA personalities and go-getters. And I don't think having a startup is any more of a challenge to balance than you're probably already trying to balance now.
Thank you. Jackie, is there another question?
Yes, there is a question for Gilson asking whether or not there was a question of intellectual property with UK regarding your product while you were working at UK.
So I was probably talking pretty fast and that was probably not very clear. So what happened was you spend a year vetting, speaking to different groups of people and trying to convince them that the product is worth putting in the UK portfolio, but ultimately they decided this was not something they wanted to put in their portfolio. So then they release the intellectual property back to us so that we can build a private company. Now, what that meant for us is we had to find, when we were lucky, we found a fabulous patent attorney. And so, which we've used her for all of our patents. And you have to start the process, and it is very, very expensive and it's very time consuming. But it's a necessity. Let's see, there's another one here. Do you think today having a woman pitch would be seen as an advantage or is still a disadvantage? So one of the things I talked about was we found early on, now you've got to understand though, this was in 2011, 2012. And so that was a different, there was a different atmosphere around female entrepreneurs to begin with. And this is just the problem that we were trying to solve. It's just not a problem that everybody has experience with or understands or appreciates. And so I think what I would be doing now is there are a lot of angel investors that only want to invest in companies that are at least 50% female owned. And so I think you want to be looking for those VC groups and angel groups that are really interested in supporting female entrepreneurs. And there are a lot more out there. And I think that for a woman who's going to pitch to potentially a group of all male investors, I think it's very important. For me, I'm not quite sure what I would have done differently because these men were all older men, and it was a long time since they had been in the room with a baby, other than maybe their grandchildren, and they didn't feed them. So I think I was it was a losing proposition. But I think that you want to speak to the group that you're talking to. So somehow translate your idea into a way that a male investor would appreciate what it is you're trying to do, would be the advice that I would give there.
So I have one last question. I always like to ask, so what have you learned about yourself through this journey?
I don't like to be mansplained. So a lot of times we'll be on a management call, which is all men. I'm still the only woman. And, they'll say something to me and I'll say, well, thanks for the mansplanation. And then, but they're used to it now and they have to catch themselves. So they really work hard not to do that, not to look to me to take the notes when we have a board meeting, which is really funny because they look at me and I'm like, don't look at me. Y'all got hands, you can write. So, those kinds of things. So that I have learned that I can stand up for myself and not back down. So.
I love the training that you're providing for these. So Kelly, what have you learned about yourself?
I think I've learned that I'm okay being out in the world and putting ideas out there more than I used to be, because I was always really introverted. And I can remember my first speech classes in middle school and just stumbling through it. So I think, I've learned that I can grow and learn these skill sets that were scary at first too. So there's always room for growth.
Dr. Dwoski?
Yeah, I guess I've learned that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail. I mean, if you don't, if you don't try, then you'll never know. And one failure doesn't mean that's the end. You can keep going. So, for me, Yopon getting a drug on the market was a great success, but it was also a failure because it wasn't the one I wanted to do. So, it's both. And you have to, just like the lady on the recorded thing, you have the best day and the worst day in the same day. That's an example of that, where it got past the FDA and now our company is sold, but boo, because that's not the one I was passionate about, so it was a great win. And I'm so thankful to have had an impact on people's lives with this new therapeutic, but at the same time, I still have something I want to do. So it was a failure and I have to kind of start over again. You just keep going and being perseverant and not getting totally wiped out by making a mistake or having a failure. Just going. It's your passion. Like she said, you can't let it go. You have to keep going.
Great advice. Well, I want to thank you all. And for the audience, show your appreciation through reactions. The Zoom reactions are nice notes in the chat. But thank you guys for participating on the panel. And so wanted to put a challenge out to everybody. And so I want you to think about doing one of these 4 things. So either if you're a university researcher, think about disclosing that technology that you've been thinking about, but you haven't had time to do it. So I want you to take this action in the next 2 weeks. So think about digging that out and, writing up the disclosure and submitting that to your tech transfer office. Another thing you might want to think about doing, if you have an idea that you've been thinking about forming a startup company around, then take one step towards pursuing that idea. Whatever, if it's picking up the phone and calling somebody or Googling something online to find out more information. So taking one step forward. If you're already kind of in a startup company or mode, so think about reaching out to a potential mentor or an investor or a co-founder. We heard a lot about teams today. That was a big theme that I heard coming through. So maybe it's taking a step to get some information from somebody or trying to build a relationship with somebody. And then the last thing is, if you're in a position to help another entrepreneur, think about introducing them to a mentor or an investor or somebody else that you think can help them. And what I'd like to do is for you guys to, if you will, share what you want to do on social media and tag UK Innovate on our Twitter or LinkedIn page, and then use the hashtag UKWN. So just think about that as a challenge of something to do over the next 2 weeks so that we can, get more women involved in seeing what this community is about. So before we do our giveaways, I want to let you know that our plan is to have an in-person conference next time around. And we really look forward to being able to have face-to-face networking. I know the Zoom breakout rooms are fun, but they're not ideal for really developing those relationships. So there's that. I also want to thank all who had a hand in making this day possible. So first of all, Ian McClure, who is the Associate VP for Research, Innovation, and Impact. He has been supportive of UKWN from the very beginning. And our OTC staff for being such a great team. A lot of them are here today. A special thank you to Jackie Green for doing her typical masterful job of pulling all this together and making it work and making it look great. And then there's one other person that's been a supporter of UKWN from the beginning, and that's Mandy Decker at Sites and Harbison. She cares deeply about women innovators, and had we met in person, you too would be thanking Mandy for the beverages in which she would have provided for us. So we want to get back to in person so Mandy can, provide our beverages. Lastly, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it and look forward to the next time. So